Good evening and welcome to Wednesday Night Live from Courtroom Confidential, the fastest growing true crime news channel on YouTube. Again, fact check me if you don't think I'm right on that one. Hello to everyone. We've got a lot of new names in the chat, and I have one really big suspicion as to where that's coming from, but my suspicion, I think, is further corroborated by all of the bare faces that I'm seeing in the chat. So hello to all the Grizzlies. I was talking with Gisela earlier today, and we had a really fabulous conversation, and then she gave out the marching orders, and you all followed, and now you're all sitting here, and I hope even Gisela said she might stay up. I think it's 1 o'clock in the morning her time, but she said she doesn't sleep anyway, so she might as well sit up and watch our show. So welcome to everybody. Thank you for being here. This is Wednesday Night Live. If you are new to this channel, I want to just introduce myself. My name is Joshua Ritter. I was a LA County district attorney, a prosecutor for 10 years. I left the office, went into private practice as a criminal defense attorney, and I've been doing that for nearly as long. And the reason we started this channel and the mission behind it is we hope to present to you as much of both sides of the courtroom as we possibly can. And Gisela says she's here. Hello. Thank you so much. You're fabulous, and thank you for bringing the entire Grizzly crew with you. We have a lot of fun tonight. First up, we are going to talk about Bryan Kohberger, the latest in that case. It seems like we went for months with zero developments, and then now all of a sudden it's been a steady flow, like drinking from a fire hose, of developments in this case. So we have on a very special guest who is GiGi from Pretty Lies and Alibis to walk us through some of that. And then, as always, we're going to do a poll, and we decided to pick cases that GiGi has been following closely so she can stick with us and talk about some of those cases. So for the poll this evening, Deb Wilner says, let's hit 25,000. We are close, folks. I think it might happen as we're sitting here tonight. Thank you all so much for the support. Wow. 24,976, according to my last count. We're almost there. The poll for this evening will be Lori Vallow. We could talk about the latest in her case. That trial is about to begin, and she just filed a motion to dismiss for prosecutorial misconduct and blah, blah, blah. We can walk through that whole thing. Donna Adelson is going to be starting her trial fairly soon, and we could talk about how will this trial look different than all of the trials that have preceded it. And I think this one will be the biggest challenge for the prosecution, but we can talk through some of the reasons for that. And their last one is Mickey Stines, and this is the sheriff's deputy who shot the judge and in his judge's chambers. And GiGi brought this case to my attention today because there's an interesting theory, motive theory, that the defense has now presented as to why he apparently lost his mind temporarily and shot that judge in that video that I'm sure that you have all seen. So Lori Vallow, Donna Adelson, Mickey Stines, we'll put that poll up. Please let us know, but I don't want to delay. Part of the reason most of you are here this evening is to hear from who will be my co-host this evening, GiGi from Pretty Lies and Alibis, one of the most well-researched channels on YouTube. Fight me if you disagree. Hey, GiGi, how you doing?
Hey, guys. What's up? Thanks for having me, Josh. And what's up to the Grizzlies? What a great group.
Oh, yeah.
Shout out to my Alibiers.
Alibiers, absolutely. Both of them run deep. You bring a deep crew. I do not want to get into a back alleyway fight with either the Grizzlies or the Alibis because you guys run deep. Thank you so much for doing this. You are so busy. If you're not doing YouTube, you're being called away to News Nation or Court TV, Law and Crime, whatever, whoever needs your expertise, because I think they value exactly the same thing that I value about you, is that when you get involved in a case, you really dig into all the details. And I know there are certain cases, one of them being all of them, the ones that we're discussing tonight, but certainly Bryan Kohberger, that if you have questions, give GiGi a call and she likely knows the answer. So thank you again.
Yeah, glad to be here. There's so much going on right now with Lori Vallow, Bryan Kohberger. Like you said, all these documents are just getting thrown up on the website. Can't keep up. I'm getting ready to go to Phoenix next weekend for Lori's trial. So it's a crazy time, but it's a good time because if you look at this case that we're going to be, this trial out in Phoenix, Charles Vallow was shot and killed January 11th, 2019, the first victim of four, almost five. So it's time for some justice. We're going to roll the justice bus right up in front
Two,
of the county courthouse.
2019 is when the first murder that we know of, we can link to this campaign. Wow. So we're going on 6 years that the families of all these folks have been dealing with this stuff.
6 years. And, for Charles's family, it's multiple family members that were killed. JJ Vallow, Charles's son, was also killed. So Charles's family has been dealt a double blow, and all the while knowing and loving Tylee as well throughout all the years. So I know they're ready for the judicial process to just be over. But it's also time for Charles's sons and everybody to get justice for him. So a lot of people have said, why bother? Well, because it's just the right thing. I mean, he lost his life and he deserves his time in court. And, I always tell people his life mattered and he deserves a trial, even though she's got 3 life sentences and she will not come out of prison unless she's, in a body bag. They all deserve their moment. So I'm ready.
Yeah. I hear that a lot, that people say, oh, it's a waste of taxpayer money. Why are we using all these resources? And I usually say, hey, those prosecutors are getting paid whether they're putting on a trial or not. By the way, your taxpayers are paying for them to sit behind a desk or be in trial putting on a case. So you might as well have them seeking justice in some of these cases that absolutely deserve it. And you're absolutely right, too. It's about the victim, and they need resolution, and their families and the state and the people of that state need to say that, hey, they brought this person to justice for a crime that was committed against their people in their state. So I'm all for it. Aside from some very rare exceptions, I don't buy into the whole this is a waste of resources thing. Why are we doubling up on it? I say go for it. But that's not the case that we're going to talk about first. The first one that we're going to jump into, I don't think you're going to get an argument out of anyone that is a case of great importance and absolutely should be pursued at all cost. And there is a lot of cost going into it, a lot of resources going into it. But this is the Bryan Kohberger trial that is set to begin for the murders of 4 beautiful young folks in Moscow. And I don't know why I have so much difficulty continuing to pronounce that name. Moscow, Idaho. Ethan Chapin, Kaylee Gonzalez, Zaina Kernodle, and Madison Mogan, who were all stabbed to death on November 13th of 2022. The reason I'm able to kind of recall that date so well is it's the day before my birthday. And I don't know why I will just always kind of tie this horrible event to a day I remember fairly well. But in any case, talk to us a little bit about, because like I said, there were gag orders in place. There were everything seemed to be filed under seal. And now all of a sudden, it's like the floodgates have been opened and we're learning so much in these filings. And what I love about it is a lot of the things we're learning are kind of like almost passing comments in some of these filings. But catch us up to some of the things that you have been most interested in that we've learned in the last few days and weeks.
Man, where to start? That the full 911 call was just something that ripped my heart out as a mother of kids close to their ages. I mean, there's been so much back and forth online, and I really avoid at this point, saying, do I think anybody's guilty or not before there's a trial, just because it kind of keeps down on the back and forth. But, there's been so much drama online with this case. And man, to hear the absolute terror in their voices as they're on the phone, not really understanding what's going on. Look, I think the elephant in the room is people say, why didn't they call at 4 a.m.? The thing you have to remember, these guys were drunk. They had been drinking alcohol, and, critical thinking aren't things that go hand in hand very well. And also, who is going to assume that there has been a quadruple murder just up the stairs And that person that you just saw is the one who did it. In fact, Kaylee's dad was on, I believe, Ashley Banfield and said, like, Xana always played pranks. You don't just see somebody. This is a party house. There's people in and out all the time. And so for me, I think it's just, these young people are dealing with survivor's guilt, I'm sure, the trauma of losing friends the way they did. My heart just really went out to them after hearing that 911 call, because there is that confusion. Well, she's unconscious. And then you hear, well, why didn't they mention blood? We don't even know if they got in the door. You hear the banging, Xana, you hear the banging. I said he could have peeked underneath the door and just seen feet or legs and just assumed they're not answering. I think a lot's going to be answered, obviously, at trial. These are going to be some of your first witnesses on the stand.
Yeah. I could not agree more with everything you're saying. I think you're absolutely right. I don't think they had stepped foot into that room. I think they may have. You can tell from their voices they are terrified. So they obviously know something is wrong. They keep on talking about, we think they're passed out. They haven't woken up. That is not the way that you have tremors in your voice. If you think all it is your friend is passed out and not waking up, they think something is very wrong, but they don't have it in them to actually go into the room. And that's why they're calling 911. That's what I firmly believe. And I think you're right. We're going to find that out very early on in the trial. And I was talking with my wife, Tiffany, about this. And we were saying too, like, you gotta put yourself back into the mindset of a 20-year-old living in a house where people were coming and going. If I hear something go bump in the night now, I'm going to get up to go check it out. But I'm probably not assuming it's somebody in the home to go kill me, right? We all don't want to assume that awful, awful thing. They're living in lives where they hear something go bump in the night and they just think it's their crazy roommate coming home late or somebody leaving the house late or whatever it is. But no, I don't think any one of them had going through their heads the absolute horror that they would be waking up to, the nightmare that they would find for themselves that following day.
No. And I know Kaylee's dad is also, he's been very defensive of these roommates. And he said, even if they had called 911 at 4 a.m., unfortunately, the four they wouldn't have been saved. The murder was so savage. They were clearly dead when he left. And that kind of stuck out to me. He may know more about the fight. I mean, they received her body, so I'm sure they were able to find out at least how brutal her murder was. And that was one thing recently he said, which is, even if they had called 911, the kids wouldn't have been saved at that point, So that was a big revelation because we've just wondered for so long. And then you have those text messages, which to me just kind of shows again, it's early in the morning. People have been drinking, come to my room. I've done the same thing where I'm like, oh, I heard a noise, get in here with me. But never would have thought, that it was somebody. So I think these little things that are coming out are very telling. And then you start getting into things that really look bad for Bryan Kohberger. Just today, Brian Enton tweeted out that his purchase history showed that he bought a mask similar to the one that the roommate described just months before the murder at Dick's Sporting Good. They're starting to link these purchases, the K-Bar knife on Amazon, looking for that replacement knife after the murders. So, we're starting to see a little more than just the DNA on the knife sheath. That doesn't look good for Kohberger because we've just been in the dark. That's really kind of the only big thing we had heard up till now. So we're just starting to get these little bite-sized pieces in big filings. You really have to weed through 20, 40 pages to find that one little nugget. But for me, these filings have really made a bigger picture, I think, of what the state has as far as evidence against Kohberger.
100.
And look, I'm a fan. I'm totally going to wait until I watch that trial to say I think the dude's guilty. It's just kind of how I prefer to do things. But you look at it from a distance and you think, man, with every filing, there's something else implicating him that really, you put it all together any other case, we would say looking pretty bad for him,
Yeah. No, you're right. Going into a case, I think we all probably deserve to treat it as though we're looking at it with fresh eyes, and let's see what can actually be proven in court. As we all know, what you hear outside of court is oftentimes very different from what is presented in court, and what is presented in court is much less. Sometimes it's restricted to the universe of the evidence. And so I think it serves us all better to watch these things with the idea, okay, let's see what's actually proven. But from a standpoint of a person, following this case and watching the news with that kind of darkness that we've been operating under, it's given way to a bunch of kind of conspiracy stuff. And you hear a bunch of people, calling into question whether or not Bryan Kohberger's involved and everything else. And now you're right. There is a lot more that the prosecution has that we were not aware of. And I think there's still a lot more that we're not aware of. But even these little tidbits that we've heard about. So the most recent thing that has come out is that they have purchase histories from him on Amazon, which we already heard about, which is the K-Bar knife from March of 2022. We still don't know exactly what that means. Does that mean his account purchased on his credit card, or is it a shared account? It sounds like there's some indication it might have been some sort of shared account. Then we have his Dick's Sporting Goods purchase on June 2022, and Under Armour in June of 2022. So all dates leading up to the murders, which first of all indicates he may have been thinking about this for a long time, if that's in fact what these items being purchased were for. But the first thing that I was trying to figure out, what could this be? And I was doing a guessing game. Oh, it could be gloves. It could be clothing. It could be everything. But now you're telling us that Brian Enton, who's doing a remarkable job on this case, has said that it was he said that one of the Dick's purchases was the mask.
It was the kind of mask that the roommate consistently described the person she saw as wearing. So that's you start looking at a Marine Corps K-Bar knife.
Yeah.
You look at, the mask. And the other thing too, that we don't have results of are some of the search warrants for certain locations around the area where they all lived. It wasn't a big distance between the two. Bank records for Bryan Kohberger. For me, the big question until trial, if they're able to answer it, is going to be, was there any interaction with Bryan Kohberger's devices with any of their social medias? Did he go into the restaurant they worked at? What's the connection? I think that's my big question is, was it, maybe did he get rejected, if allegedly? What is the motive? Because you don't just go pick a house and say, I'm going to go in there. We know he rode by that house prior to the murders. He allegedly rode by after the murders, right before he took that selfie. But I just want to know that connection. What was it? Who was his target?
That is the biggest mystery in this whole thing. I want to get into that, but before I do, I've seen that our comments are lighting up. So it looks like we did hit 25,000. So Thank you, everybody. That's fabulous that it's happening here. And I got to give a big shout out again to Gisela and the Grizzly crew for, I think, absolutely making this happen. So thank you, everybody.
Awesome.
That's very
Congrats,
cool.
man.
I think that's the second time that we've hit a milestone like this while we've been on a live stream. So that's very cool.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah, it's fun stuff.
That's awesome.
I agree with you. The motive, listen, prosecution, we've said this again and again and again, does not have to prove motive. It's not an element of the crime. They don't have to prove the why behind it, which is oftentimes baffling to people, because they say, well, that's the most important question I have, is why did somebody commit this crime? But you have to prove intent. You have to prove that they meant to do it, but you don't have to prove why they meant to do it. And the reason for that is that who knows what goes through somebody's head? Who knows what is in that man's head that we're looking at right here as to why he did this? And yes, one of the biggest things that people have been searching for is what is the connection between Bryan Kohberger and these 4 kids? And I've heard so many different theories about who was the quote unquote target of all of this. Be honest with you, I would not be shocked if this was some sort of sick intellectual experiment on his part, that it was just the idea of, could he get away with this thing? Could he, because it was so planned to me, and it does seem to be so random, and it is not someone that he has a clear connection to. Now, again, we're saying this because we don't know all the evidence. Maybe that will become abundantly clear in the trial, what his connection is to them. But if things remain how they are, it seems so random that I wonder if that was part of it to him, that just, hey, I'm going to go try to commit a murder and see if I can't get away with it. And by the way, people do awful, awful things like that.
Yeah, and that's an interesting theory, honestly, I hadn't thought of. But I think that, if you look at Bryan Kohberger and what we've heard about him as a person before the murders, it just doesn't seem like he would be in the same social circles as these, you
Right.
got sorority sisters, frat boys. It just seems like he was more reserved, a little more, you know what I'm saying? Just not the same. It's kind of like he's the kind of guy you probably wouldn't invite to a party because it would be awkward just from everything that we've heard, So, yeah, that's my big question. And we may not know, but then again, if they've got his devices and see, hey, before he went to Moscow, he was looking at this person, that person. Did he message this person? Did he go into the restaurant they work at? And I don't know why I really kind of still think this whole rejection thing, because it's not like this is somebody that just said, I'm going to find her. I'm going to pick her out. I don't know. I just feel like there's something there, and hopefully we'll find out at trial, but we may not.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
Well,
But
that becomes an interesting question, because if we don't find that out at trial, will that be something that bothers the jurors? Because like you said, that is one of the things that people want to know most. And if this is a guy, if they have a suspect and they are, through circumstantial evidence and otherwise, trying to tie him to this murder, and the defense is doing their darndest to say it's not him, and they start to question that, I think one of the things they might struggle with is, well, we don't even know why he would do this. And I'm not saying that will be a obstacle they can't get past, but if the prosecution doesn't present something to them, even if that is something like my theory, like he did it for the thrill of it, they got to give them something to hang their hats on, because otherwise I think that might play into the defense's theory that it's not him. They're just going after this guy with blinders on.
yeah, I agree. And you're right. I mean, I watch jurors all the time, and they want to know the story. When I just recently,
Yes.
I was in the Rose Petal trial here in Greenville, where Christina Parcell was murdered by the pianist Zachary Hughes. And once he took the stand and really started explaining everything, they were glued, not just because it was him on the stand, but because up until that point, they hadn't heard of a motive. Now, it was a little different in that case because he was not allowed to really talk about his motive, because it involved child sex abuse materials that wasn't found until after she was murdered. But he got it out on the stand. He got contempt charges for that as well. But like that matters with life. But the jury wants to know the why, because it's the whole picture. And so I think that they've probably got something.
I think so
like you
too.
say, was it something where he's taking criminal justice and we're a forensic files generation. We grew up watching, the things that get people caught. Is it maybe a mixture of both? It very well could be that there is an issue there he had with somebody, and I'm a criminal justice major. I know a little more about how to cover things up. Yeah. Look, you think about it. Had he allegedly not left that knife sheath there, we may not have this guy.
No, easily.
Right.
Easily.
So,
I mean, they were searching, right? I mean, they had bolos out to the community about, different vehicles that they were trying to figure out what could have been involved. I mean, it was a flat out unsolved mystery until they got the FBI involved. and managed to, Rube Goldberg that DNA so that they were able to finally find their way back to Bryan Kohberger. And lo and behold, the guy that they zero in on, has some problems where he can place himself that evening, happens to drive a car similar to what they're looking for. Everything else started to fall into place. And now with these purchase histories and everything else, I think they've are managing to paste together what looks like a fairly strong case. But you're right. It all starts with that. It all rises and falls with that DNA still. If they don't have that DNA at trial, I don't know if they have a trial.
I agree. I don't think that it would be as strong of a case for sure. And the other thing that I've thought about all these years is we know that there's theories that he rode by the house, a bit before he did the murders. But you think about how brazen it is to go into a 2-3 story house that is not isolated. There's a frat house. You could, throw a rock and hit it. This is not a house out in the middle of nowhere. You're going in there not knowing who is in there, how many people are in there. That to me, that speaks to kind of the mindset that the killer was determined to kill somebody in that house, because I just don't see this dude hanging out with them in that house all the time.
No.
I
would be
Ethan wasn't
surprised if
supposed to.
he'd never even stepped foot in that house.
Oh, yeah, same here. But, to think that you're going in a house that big and not know who's in there with one knife.
Yeah.
It's brazen. You had to want to kill somebody to do that, to walk in there.
Yes. And I wonder too, if we're going to find out that maybe he didn't realize how many people would have been in that house, right? I mean, it's not like there were people in that house that don't usually sleep in that house. There were people, it wasn't the type of house where you can absolutely predict who's going to be where at what time, right? So he may have been surprised by the occupants of that. Court TV is here. Thank you so much for joining us. The rejection theory is interesting. Thank you. I appreciate that. We'll see if that actually pans out. I think you're right, though. I think, Gigi, whatever it is, they have a theory, and they're going to absolutely give the jurors a theory. I wanted to get back, though, to one of the other things that was a revelation within the last few days, and that is that the prosecution has put his family members on their witness list. And that has caused some consternation with Bryan Kohberger's team, because that means that they won't be allowed to be in court, because there's what we call now I'm blanking on the name, but there's a motion to exclude. That's it. To exclude witnesses, meaning if you're going to testify, you're not allowed to be in court, because they don't want you to be influenced by what's being testified to in court. So his family won't be able to be present. But that brings up the then question of, well, what would the prosecution possibly call them for? I've got some theories, but I'm curious if you had some theories about that.
Yeah, for the dad, I mean, we know that he got pulled over with his dad when they were driving cross country. Maybe they're going to ask about his demeanor. Did he say anything odd? And then he was home with the family when they were doing the surveillance, when they did that trash pull, saw him allegedly going out, throwing away garbage in the neighbor's trash can with gloves on. So I think a lot of what they're going to ask them is really, what happened when he got home? How was he? Was he different? How long was it after and I'm sure the chat knows, how long was it after the murders that he went back? It wasn't long. Did you notice any injuries on him? Were there any scratches? Were there any cuts? That kind of thing. I think that it doesn't necessarily have to be the slam dunk testimony that convinces a jury. It can be the people that knows him best that can say, hey, look, he was weird. Like, he was not acting like himself. And that just lends to the state's theory that is your killer. Yeah. So I think they could be very beneficial to the state, just in a very small way.
Yes. And I agree with you. I think it will be probably a lot about his demeanor, but I think it could also be things like, did he bring up any discussion of the murders? Was he curious to hear your thoughts about the murders? Was he curious to hear if you had suspicions about who the murderer may be? I mean, this is what we hear many times about people who've committed crimes. They want to know the reaction. They're obsessed with the media coverage. He likely would be obsessed with his own father's reaction to the whole thing. He may be giving his father bizarre alibis during that time in some sort of hope that, hey, by the way, remember I went camping on the 13th not too long ago? Remember I told you I was out stargazing that evening? I don't know. I mean, we're all just kind of making this up, but I could see those conversations taking place. I also want to know, you mentioned disposing of garbage, how he was behaving, about what things he may have been throwing out. What was he doing with that vehicle? Was he cleaning up that vehicle? Because they searched that vehicle with a fine-tooth comb and his apartment and found nothing linking him to those crimes, which is mind-boggling to me. And I think something the defense is certainly going to exploit. So I want to know, when Bryan was home, he spent a good 6 hours out cleaning his car with bleach and a toothbrush, which we thought was odd because he didn't seem to really care about that car that much. I mean, that might be the type of things that we hear them testify to.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. And look, I mean, I will say that's one thing to me that blows my mind as well, is as bloody as those crime scenes, as those rooms had to have been, for zero of the victim's DNA to be found on anything Bryan Kohberger owns or lives or whatever. Maybe he paid attention, if he's the killer, he paid attention during class when they talked about the ways you leave DNA, except for the knife sheath, which clearly probably in the moment was an accident. Of course, he didn't mean to leave it there. I really think maybe he was, I don't know. I mean, Ethan wasn't supposed to be there. Ethan is not a small guy. Ethan is tall, probably more Kohberger size. Was there a struggle? There's just so much we don't know. But yeah, I mean, I would venture a guess that he was well decked out in things that you could peel off.
Sure.
And not, shoe covers alone. If you get some of those shoe covers that come up to your calf, you're not going to get any blood on your shoelaces. You're not going to get any blood in the car if you take all that off before, you leave. So, but that is impressive. I don't want to say impressive because it's horrible, but I mean, he did some things right. And like we just said, had he not left the knife sheath, we may not even be here. We may still be working on a cold case years later, but there's never a perfect crime.
No.
And if he's convicted, this very well will be a prime example of that. You do everything else that doesn't lead to you, but you left your DNA on a knife sheath where a victim was.
Yes. Gisela, could you put that comment up again? Kaylin says that they believe, Gisela says, there it is. He was pulled over by police. And I think this is the video we've all seen where it was him and his dad pulled over by the police when they're on that road trip on December 15th. So that's a month and change after the murders. So figure they may have been on the road for a few days or something like that. But in any case, you're right. They still don't have a suspect. Nobody's been arrested, and he's talking to his dad a month later. So that will be conversations, I'm sure, that are ongoing in that car. I would be shocked if he never mentions it to his dad in that entire ride that they took home.
And this is such a tiny area that it's not like you're in New York City. Even if it were New York City, the murder of 4 young college students would be huge. But this is tiny towns. I mean, these are just, they're so small. So of course they talked about it.
I was talking about it here. I mean, I mean, it was such a horrific nightmare of a thing that everybody was talking about it for a while. And then the idea that nobody was captured. I mean, that's another thing that just got the news stirring up. Where is this person that killed these kids? Because I thought it would be solved within a matter of days. Oh, it was some friend of theirs lost his mind, whatever it was. But no, weeks are going on and they don't have anybody arrested. So yeah, it was definitely
it was a scary time. Somebody just had a good comment. Do you think he dextered his car with like plastic? I mean, that could explain.
Sure.
I mean, of course, there are ways. And the other thing, I'm assuming he must have wore some really, really good gloves, because y'all know what happens when blood gets on that knife and you're stabbing. It slips, and 9 times out of 10, the killer is going to slice their hand wide open. But clearly, they didn't see any evidence of that with him. His family probably would have noticed. But yeah, I mean, you think about it. If you look at that photo of the thumbs up, it almost looks like maybe there's some little marks on his hand, but I guess we'll see. I'm sure after they arrested him,
Yeah.
they did the very close up photos, but a month later, a scratch would have healed. But I just thought, I kind of zoomed in and enhanced, and it looked like a couple of places there maybe was some red spots. But the one thing I noticed about this picture too, and it could be the lighting, but in every other picture I've seen of him, he has really pretty blue eyes. They just look black here to me.
Yeah.
It's like his skin almost looks translucent.
No,
It's
it's a
just
spooky photo. It's
it
a
is
haunting
spooky.
photo. Yeah.
And yeah, and I mean, it just he looks so different in
Yeah.
this photo than any other picture I've ever seen him in.
Yeah.
That's one thing that
Um,
stood out to me when we saw that.
I want to get to some questions because I know people have been asking. So sit tight for a second. But one point I wanted to make that I always try to make. This is something I learned very early on in my career from a forensic medical examiner at the LA Sheriff's Department. And she always said, and I'm sure she didn't make this up, but it stuck with me because she taught it to me, was the idea that the absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. Meaning, yes, they didn't find DNA from the crime scene or evidence from the crime scene in his vehicle or in his home. And that is the absence of evidence. But that doesn't mean that he wasn't there. And that is a fallacy that many times we can fall into, or defense attorneys try to exploit. Being a defense attorney, I feel like comfortable I can say that. But it's the idea that we naturally think, well, if you didn't find evidence of it, that must mean that it didn't happen. But to your point, no, that doesn't necessarily. What that means is he could have cleaned it up. He could have somehow covered up the vehicle, or it could have been there and they just didn't find it. I mean, they went over that car and they went over that house, but that doesn't mean that they searched every possible inch on that car and his house, and they could have just merely missed it. The absence of that evidence does not prove that he wasn't at that crime scene, but just buckle up and wait for those arguments to be made by the defense. Let's get to some of the questions that we have. Did you have any
Well,
things that
while
stood
you're
out to you?
looking, one
Yeah,
thing I want to
please.
say, while you're looking though, one thing too is you look at Alec Murdaugh, and yes, I say Alec because I'm Southern. There was zero DNA evidence against him. It was all circumstantial that convicted him.
Yeah.
Seems like in this case, you got both.
Yeah. No, 100%. Circumstantial, by the way, some of the circumstantial cases I've handled have been the strongest.
Yep.
Circumstantial can be incredibly convincing sort of stuff. P. Lola's mom says, is so random. How did he choose that house and a DoorDash just left the scene he had to be watching? I kind of agree. I don't by random, I don't mean that he just drove out one night and selected a random home. I just mean that I don't know if we're going to find a connection to that house other than he may have said, you know what? I see those girls. They're dead. I'm going to see if I can't make them dead and see if I can't get away with it. As morbid and awful as that sounds.
Yeah. No, I agree.
Let's see what else we have here. Oh, how about this one? Blue Bear Art says, what do you think of them tearing the house down? Will it be a problem? What do you think?
I wasn't a fan of it, to be honest. I mean, you could have taken that jury. Well, it's Boise now, but I just feel like it should have been left up till after the trial. I mean, you can't put toothpaste back in the tube and you can't reconstruct a house you just demolished. On one hand, does that make me think the state has way more than we know and they really don't need that crime scene at their disposal? Maybe. I just thought it was premature.
No. Yeah. And same, I get a lot of these questions about the home. Kim Lindgren, thank you for the question, says, how much of a deal will it become? What's funny is I think both the prosecution and the defense agreed to it. I don't think either one of them, either they didn't object or they flat out agreed to it, which was surprising to me too. I hope it won't become a big deal, but I was shocked by it as well because I thought, in many cases, the crime scene is not all that important, but in a case like this, it kind of is because you have surviving roommates and they didn't hear certain things and certain things they did hear. I think it might be important to jurors to have seen that home and where was this all taking place?
And I'm sure they probably did a lot of videos in that house going room to room and photos that they'll show the jury. But still, I just felt like Man, yeah, by the way, if you see this little red spot right here, I'm such a klutz. I went to look out my window and I totally just banged my head on my Jeep window. It was
Oh,
up.
no.
Oh, it was up. And I was just like, because we have wildfires around here right now and it's really
Yeah, how are
smoky.
you doing with
Oh,
that?
I'm good. I'm like 30 minutes
Okay.
away, but I know people evacuated, but I had passed where you could see it and I was at a red light. So I went to turn and stick my head out. The window was up. I've done that before. I'm just saying. I just noticed you can see the little goose egg right there. Oh, y'all.
Um, Nature Girl, love that name, says, what does everyone think about the phone ping evidence supposedly placing him at near the scene? I mean, this kind of goes along with that idea that I make a big deal about the DNA, but that really isn't all of it. We're right. I believe it rises and falls on that, but it's not the only thing in this case.
No, and it puts him near the crime scene. I mean, that's you've got the DNA on the sheath. You put him near the crime scene, it's just like a big puzzle. You're just putting pieces together for this jury. They've got so many pieces to connect, and this is part of it. And the more things like this that they have, and then you have the purchases that are all pretty related to what we've seen in these documents that have just been released. Little things become big things, but I'm always a big fan of digital evidence because you really can't dispute it.
Right.
You can't dispute that your phone pinged on this cell tower facing this way. And it's not just once, it's multiple times that night that he was in the vicinity of the crime scene before the murders. And I think that that is big because what are the odds? And I'll tell you, I looked at the Weather Channel Historica data. That night it was cloudy. I've never been stargazing when it's cloudy.
Yeah.
But it was cloudy from, late in the evening up until in the morning. So, things like that they put in front of the jury, it's a big picture. And
Well,
I
and a
think
lot
that
of
go ahead.
sorry, go ahead.
No, it's good. I didn't take my ADHD medicine today. I'll go all day.
Well, what I was going to say too is sometimes evidence is helpful in what it not as proving as much as what it shows can't be proven. And that's a really awkward way of saying, listen, the car pinging may not place him at the scene, but what it does is it doesn't place him in Arizona during the time of the murders. Okay. So if your suspect tied through DNA, you believe to be this person, there is nothing that I have seen so far that puts him in a place where he could not have committed these murders.
Right.
In other words, something like an alibi, which we have not heard. The best we've heard is he's looking at the stars on a cloudy night, or his phone was turned off and therefore you can't tell where he was. But none of that says he could not have committed these crimes. And I think that's the way that the prosecution will likely portray it. That we're not hinging our case on the phone pings, but we're saying, by the way, this doesn't exclude him as a suspect.
Right. And you think too, not just the phone data, but I'm curious, we haven't heard, did the Elantra have an infotainment center that would have also roughly done what the phone did, which is show location?
Yeah.
Does it show accelerations? That was a big thing in Murdaugh's trial. It showed when he left the house, he accelerated at the spot where he threw the phone out the window. I think there's going to be so many little things that will relate to the phone pings where you say, hey, we don't have the phone data from this time to this time, but the infotainment center says he parked this many feet from the house.
Yeah.
Now, I'm just theorizing here. That's hypothetical. But what we don't know, I think, is key. They're not going to show all their hands. And I think what we're seeing now is probably not the biggest aha moment. They're going to save that for trial.
I think you're probably right. And this kind of goes to Maureen's question here, and then we'll get moving on to our poll, is that wasn't there a gag order on this case? Why is so much information coming out now? And that's because the judge did decide to lift some of these orders. Not the gag order. So the gag order has to do with the actual attorney speaking to the media, but all of these motions had been filed under seal, meaning they'd been filing stuff like this all along, and we just weren't able to learn about it. And now all of a sudden he's like, I don't know why this is all under seal. I'm removing those orders. here's all of the documents that they've been filing back and forth with each other. And like you said, it's not even that a lot of it is flat out telling us things. It's you read through all of it, and all of a sudden you find this incredible needle in a haystack moment where you find out, hey, by the way, they have his Amazon purchase history.
Right. And you kind of touched on this in the beginning too. In making things so secretive, it has fueled the speculation, the conspiracy theories. But the judge essentially said, like, this is a public trial and we shouldn't be keeping all this stuff from the public, essentially,
Yeah.
is what he said. And I think it's right, to do that to a degree that ensures he gets a fair trial because, like him or hate him, support him, think he's innocent, think he's guilty, he deserves a fair trial. That's what we're, if we were in any shoes where we're accused, we would want to be protected. But at the same time, we see it in all these big cases when very little is put out. It gives people a lot of time to get their gears working and just to do the hypotheticals. And the scary thing is sometimes if the right person that has a lot of followers says something, it goes all over the internet and people take it as fact. And so I think it is important to be transparent as much as they can safely in a case like this to minimize some of that.
Yeah. A lie makes its way halfway around the world before the truth has time to get their boots on in the morning. So
No,
I
my cat's trying to
agree.
knock over my light. No,
I thought you were telling me.
sorry.
No.
It's just controlled chaos at my house.
No, and I think to that point, it also breeds distrust in the system, in that justice is being done, and that when people don't know all of these things as they're happening along the way, yes, conspiracy theories, yes, a person kind of takes up the mantle of that, but then it also people just begin to kind of get dug in, and they don't trust when things are released, and they're like, well, we're being lied to. And I in a case like this of this magnitude, with the loss of life of these young kids that we're talking about, I think they deserve better, and I'm glad that the judge made the decision. But
I think so too.
should we turn to our poll, Kaylin?
Let's do it.
Kaylin, should we tell us who won?
Adonis?
Lori Vallow at 35%. All right. One of your favorites here.
Express.
I know you are. Buckle up. I know this is your. Let's get it going. Tell us. I mean, her trial is set to begin March 31st. She's representing herself. She has been contentious and cantankerous and ornery in court, and she's blaming everybody for her troubles. And it does not seem like she has abandoned any of the bizarre spiritual beliefs and everything else that she carried through the first trial. And her latest thing is that she's accusing the prosecution of gross, I forget how she phrased it, but it was something along the lines of gross prosecutorial misconduct, demanding that she have her trial dismissed. She's alleging they had access to her text messages illegally and access to her mail. But that's my summary. You give us what you have been noticing, and what do you expect at this coming trial?
Yeah. So the emotional aspect of it for Lori is going to be her biggest challenge. If you notice in all of these pretrial hearings, when she hears something she doesn't like, her voice gets forceful. She gets snarky. The tone is just, Lori tone. And so my question is, when there is a witness on the stand, let's say Kay Woodcock, love Kay, Lori doesn't.
Right.
If Kay is up there telling the truth, because she just filed a motion asking that Kay not be allowed to testify because it would be hearsay and she doesn't know the facts, when in fact, Kay helped Charles pack up after Lori left him. She was helping take care of JJ. And we know she was the beneficiary of Charles's life insurance policy. It's personal with her. And I think that that's going to be her downfall, because the minute one of these investigators or any of these witnesses say something she doesn't agree with, can she put her emotions on the back burner and act like a lawyer? I don't think so. I think we're going to have at least one time in this trial, if not several, where she loses her mind. And maybe we have to take a break. because if you watch Dateline with Keith Morrison, when he would challenge her, she would almost be screaming at him. Like if she says it louder, she's going to convince him of something. That's kind of how she is. When I was at her trial in Idaho, she was constantly shaking her head no, making faces when investigators or witnesses would say something she didn't agree with. Now we know she has this, cockamamie story that like Tylee killed JJ and then, whatever. I just think that this is going to be a train wreck on a lot of levels. And then one thing that just came out yesterday was her talking about the prosecutor. Like you said, she wants her off the case. And she took a very personal jab at the prosecutor. And I think this is how the trial could unfold. It said, because the court has ignored the state's conduct, Trina K became more blatant in her disregard for her ethical obligation. This is sadly similar to her longtime boyfriend, Juan Martinez's behavior in a high-profile case here years ago in Maricopa County. It seems her behavior is not original. Well, that would be the Jodi Arias trial. He was the prosecutor in that trial, had a lot of issues after the trial, I believe he even got disbarred. But the fact that she takes a personal jab at the prosecutor like that just goes to show you she can't stay professional. She's got to get dirty. So that's my thing. And I'll be there for the first week. I'm going to come home, go back out probably for a lot of the state's case because, oh my gosh, y'all. I would walk to Phoenix if I had to.
I'm sure you would. What's funny about what you're saying about her behavior and can't control herself and everything, the judge is also giving her some leeway in these pretrial hearings. He's allowing her to be heard and he's allowing her to have her moments and everything else. But that all changes when you put jurors in the room. And lawyers know that. Lawyers know you can get away with a lot without the jury in the room, and you can bang your fist on the table and get all sort of upset about the rulings. But when the jury comes into the room, there is a decorum that is expected because the judge's primary, if not most important job is to make sure that what the jurors are hearing is the evidence so that they can base their decision on the evidence alone and not theatrics and not outbursts and not everything else, because this judge doesn't want a mistrial. This judge doesn't want some appealable issue happening. The judge wants to see this to the finish line. And that's why I'm saying that when she starts having these outbursts, he's going to shut it down in a way that she's not used to, which she can either respond to by understanding, okay, I need to shape up, or she can dig her heels in and go back after him. And if she does, then I think you're right. That's put the jurors back in their room, but put the defendant back into lockup, everything comes to a halt. And this might turn into a mess, which is just incredibly sad for me, for the victims and the victims' families and all of this, that they're going to have to suffer through the Lori Vallow circus over the next couple of weeks. Do we know what exactly her defense is? Like, what have we heard a glimmer of what she's actually intends to argue?
Well, I mean, in the Chandler documents that were released a few years ago, it's the self-defense case that Charles came in. She took his phone. He flipped out. Tylee came out with the bat. Charles grabbed the bat from Tylee. And then at some point, Alex is grappling on the ground with Charles, hitting him in the head while he's grappling. Tell me how that works. And then Charles hit Alex with the bat. Now, here's the thing. Charles Vallow was a semi-pro baseball player. If he had hit Alex with that bat, Alex would have been on his journey to the other side in July of 2019. I fully believe Lori hit him in the head with the bat. He kept having to rub it on the body cam to keep it bleeding. But I think she's going to go with the self-defense theory. However, I'm doing a crash course next week to get everybody ready. And I spent a lot of time going over all three of their police statements that day, Tylee, Alex, and Lori. There are so many discrepancies that, Lori says she was in the house when the shot happened. Alex is like, no, she was gone. There was so many things that were, just didn't match up. And it was pretty obvious the first day. But it's the self-defense theory that Charles was, going to hit everybody with the bat. And then Alex went and got his gun instead of calling 911 and shutting everybody in a room. He got his gun and shot him and said he never shot him lying down. But when they moved the body, they didn't find this till much later. There's a defect in the floor. There's a defect in the bottom of the, what do you call it? That like is above your floor. I'm blanking, like chair rail, but lower. Your baseboard.
The floorboard, the baseboard.
Yeah, like your baseboard, your floorboard.
Yeah.
So there was just a lot of discrepancy there, but it's going to be a self-defense defense. And we'll just see how well she can remember, what she told police that day. She has access to all this through discovery. So maybe she's been studying up on what she said in the past. But it's interesting because 30 minutes into her police interview, she was offered a victim's advocate. Lori had a good history of being able to pull the wool even over the police's eyes. And she did that day. And they went home. They all went home.
Yeah, there's a certain charm is not the right word, but there's a certain element that she had during those interviews that they bought it, whatever it was, they believed it. Let's take some of these questions here. JC Broadway says, how much of her murder convictions can come into this trial? I know the judge has considered this. What is the position on these?
I don't think he has necessarily ruled on that, and it may be a at trial thing where if it's going to come up, then they have to discuss it outside the presence of the jury. But the state said, it's inevitable. These names are going to come out during trial, meaning JJ and Tylee. They're not going to allow any of Tylee's testimony that or statements that she gave to police the day Charles was shot, because like the prosecutor said or the judge, you can't kill somebody and then expect their statements that they gave help you out at your conspiracy to commit murder trial. So I don't know how they get around it per se, to not ever disclose that she's been convicted 3 times of murder. But I don't think the judge really dug his heels in one way or the other. It seems like maybe if it looks like it's going to open the door at trial, they'll probably have to argue it, and decide what's left.
And if I'll bet you dollars to donuts, she's the one who opens the door. I imagine she'll do something, say something, ask some question that they just cannot avoid getting into the fact that she's a convicted murderer.
And that's because she's not an attorney, and it's not going to be at the forefront of her mind to not go there.
Correct. 100%.
And that's just good for the state. Then they can show she's, a 3 times convicted murderer, and 2 of those being her own kids. So,
and if that comes out, that's going to be very tricky for the judge and everyone to handle too, because that will have a hugely prejudicial doesn't necessarily mean bad. It'll have a hugely prejudicial effect on them. And how will he handle that in such a way that they're not convicting her simply because they now find out she's being convicted of murdering her own children? Amanda Bollinger Mullen, who joins us from Facebook. If you guys didn't know, we're also streaming this on Facebook. So thank you so much for asking a question. Says, is there anything Lori could do at trial that the judge could say she is no longer allowed to serve as her own attorney? And the answer to that, I'll take this one, is absolutely. He just may listen. You have a right to do it, but I should say this way: you have a right to having a lawyer, and you can waive that right, but you can also forfeit your right to waive that right, if that makes sense. The way that all works, she can, from her own conduct, simply be stripped of that privilege of being able to represent herself if she cannot conduct herself in a professional way, and if she's turning this whole thing into an absolute circus, or continues to disobey his orders and everything else. In other words, she cannot derail or invite a mistrial in her own trial. And if the judge feels like it's going that way, a judge can remove her. And that's why standby counsel is sitting there. That's why standby counsel is always there in case they say, I don't want to do this anymore, or in case they, for some reason, get their privilege to do that stripped of them, and we don't lose the trial. That's the thing we want to avoid here at all costs, is some sort of a mistrial that we have to go through this entire mess all over again. Here's a good one that I'm curious about. Nate Eaton is this reporter from the East Idaho News, who's been doing incredible work on this case. She's put him on her witness list. Talk to us about what you know about that. And do we know if the judge has yet ruled about whether or not she can, in fact, call him? She's going to have some, they call it offer of proof as to what he would testify to. But do we know what she would even expect him to testify to?
No, because Charles's murder was the first, happened July 11th, 2019. Nate didn't even know their names until it was revealed JJ and Tylee were missing, which I think was towards the end of November when that all this moved to Idaho. So he had nothing to do with anything about Charles Vallow. Actually, Justin Lum from Fox 10 Phoenix, who has also been on this case since the beginning, I believe he reported on Charles's murder the day it happened. So just today on my episode, I went through a filing by the state where, by Lori and the state, where the state is saying, look, she has 11 witnesses and an expert witness. We don't even have contact numbers for these people. We can't get in touch with them to interview them. Nate Eaton said he has not been sent a subpoena. I kind of theorized she put him on the witness list so he couldn't sit in her trial. Because if he's on the witness list,
interesting. She's playing that game. That's kind of
my theory. But here's the thing too. Her expert witness, according to the state, hasn't even started on the work and has done very little. At this point, you're 15, you're a week away from trial or more. They haven't gotten any reports from this expert witness. They don't know what he's doing. So the state is asking that all 12 of her witnesses, 11 being witnesses and then the one expert witness, not even be precluded, not even be allowed in, because at this point, they have tried 4 times to reach out to Lori's paralegal as well as her defense investigator, asking for addresses, asking for phone numbers. Do you have a report on what nothing, not getting responses at all to their emails. So I kind of think the judge sort of alluded to this at the last hearing. You're out of time. Like it's 30 days. So I kind of think maybe the judge going to nix all of her witnesses, and that's going to send her over the edge.
Yeah.
If all of her witnesses don't come.
If she's not already clearly over the edge,
that's a figure of speech, but that might be like the lit fuse that sends her into outer space or to another planet or wherever she's going. Yeah. But so that's what's interesting is she has all these witnesses, but like the defense said, we don't have time to file motions in limine or any objections or anything at this point. You're talking 11 people to track down and an expert witness who is computer forensics that would be testifying about digital evidence and hasn't even started work. And if he has, it's just barely. So I think there's a good chance none of these witnesses are coming in, and Nate is on that witness list. So if the judge says, like, you screwed up, you didn't meet your deadlines, and they can't come in, then I guess Nate Eaton would be able to sit in the courtroom. But I just feel like she didn't want him in there.
Yeah. God, it's such a mess. And the judge, I will say, has been meticulous in making sure that every decision she is making, she's well aware of the consequences of that decision. And she's advised and acknowledged, and he's taken all the proper waivers and everything else he needs to do to create a perfect record before he allows her to continue to drive straight into a wall. But I agree.
And I think the thing too, that is Lori knows her clock is ticking. We have this trial, and then very shortly after, we're going to have the trial for the attempted murder of Brandon Boudreaux, her ex-nephew-in-law. And then she goes back to Idaho, and she goes in the prison system. And we might hear about her if somebody was in with her and comes out and says, hey, I was in with Lori Vallow. Right. Here's what she's like. But it's all going to quieten down, and she knows that. This is her last stand. So I think she wants to go out big. She wants to go out and be remembered for her job as a defense attorney, or acting as her own defense attorney. So I think expect the unexpected, and I think we're going to see some fireworks, and I'm going to be there for it.
That is going to begin on March 31st. We will follow it. We will check in with you more about it.
Yeah,
It's getting late on the East Coast. Do we have you for a few more minutes, or do I
we
got to get
do.
you out of here? Okay.
No, I'm
I'm going to
good.
make an executive decision because you talked to me a little bit about the Mickey Stines case earlier today, and I thought that was kind of some fascinating stuff. The defense attorney on this case, Jeremy Bartley, has been very forthcoming about his thoughts on the case, the defenses he plans on bringing. We heard earlier that it's going to be along the lines of an insanity defense, that it's going to be that he had some sort of mental break, but we weren't given any idea as to what that mental break was caused by. And now Bartley's starting to let on as to what that mental break might have been ignited by. Do you want to fill us in there? I kind of set you up. Let us know what the latest is from Mr. Bartley.
Yeah, I'm trying to pull this up because I do have a little summary. So, obviously there's been a lot of rumors about what would cause him to shoot his friend. I mean, they had just had lunch, they had been friends for decades. But just in a nutshell, it says the defense attorney said Sheriff Stines feared that backlash from his deposition testimony caused him to fear that his or his family's lives were in danger. Bartley claimed Stines' mental health was affected by the perceived threat that stemmed from the deposition. Ultimately, he was in fear for the safety of his wife and his daughter, and I think what you see there is the result of that. So the deposition, for those of you who don't know, there was a deputy who was under Mickey Stines who essentially was having sex in Judge Mullen's chambers with women that were out on bond. And he also worked for the company that does the electronic monitoring. So when you have an electronic monitor, you have to pay a fee every month for that monitor to be out on bond, bail, whatever. And so in exchange for them not being in violation of their release terms, he would not make them pay the fee for their ankle monitoring in exchange for sex in the judge's chambers. So sheriff,
Can we just pause for a moment and talk
dude,
about
it's a
how
mess.
completely wild that is?
Yeah.
That was actually taking place, and this is a smaller community, smaller town, but it's one thing that he's exploiting that whole system for whatever kind of gain. It's another thing that he was using it to basically extort sex out of these poor women. But then he's doing it in the judge's chambers, I think is the coup de grace to me of the whole thing. So totally wild thing that now Stines, as the deputy in charge of that area, is being in a deposition, being asked to testify to. Sorry. So that's what this deposition was about. Please continue. I just had to have that moment.
No, it is. It's a really good point, but it's that perceived threat. So it kind of goes to that was the argument in Menendez, if you remember, was the perceived threat that they were going to come home that night and they were going to be killed. I think it was perceived threat, but yeah. So we've heard so many rumors, and I'm not going to repeat them because I don't do rumor, but very interesting, And then there was the thing about the phone.
Right.
Who did he dial on the judge's phone? And as soon as he hung up that phone, that was it. Bap, bap, bap. He was done. And what's crazy, if you do this in a still shot at certain points, it almost looks to me, and I'm not saying he is, I'm just saying my perception. There's one still where it almost looks like Judge Mullins is kind of laughing. Maybe
Yeah.
he thinks, all right, he's roughing me up, he's busting my chops. Because they were that buddy.
Right.
They had just had beans and a
lunch.
salad.
Yeah.
Yeah, like 20 years. But I know that there are I've had a lot of locals from that area reach out to me privately and tell me what's going around in the town, and it's interesting. Probably half of it isn't true, and maybe the truth is somewhere in the middle. But if some of it's even partly true, this is going to be one to watch. Going to be some
Yeah.
explosive stuff. And he thought that his wife and daughter essentially were going to be kidnapped because of his deposition. But I just don't, And my
Yeah.
question too is, why was the judge letting this guy in his chambers to have sex with women?
Exactly. If the judge knew, right? I mean,
Yeah,
I guess
right.
that's a dot we have to connect if the judge was aware of it. But if he was aware of it, that's the corruption is just boundless in this area. We had Gavin Fish on our show not too long ago to talk a little bit about this case. And one of the things that we talked about and he pointed out was the idea, to go along with what you said, that if you watch that video, at one point, Stines pulls out his gun and is kind of just holding it by his side. And that is, I think, the same point that you're talking about, where the judge appears to be like, what are you doing? You
Yeah.
kind of put that away. I mean, we don't have sound, but in my head, I imagine the dialogue is, oh, put that away, Mickey. What are you doing? Quit it. You're scaring me, kind of a thing. And his reaction is not initially to duck and cover. His reaction is kind of like, what are you doing? Quit being crazy. And it's a weird moment because you have to wonder, is this where, according to the defense, that mental break is taking place? Or is this where he is making that premeditated decision to shoot and kill this judge? Or I had a theory that, is this a moment where because he knew that judge also carried a weapon in his chambers, is that a moment he's maybe hoping the judge will go for that gun so that he can react to that? I don't know, but it is such a bizarre thing to watch, even without the sound, because it goes from benign to incredibly violent, and you don't see the triggering moment.
Yeah, if we had sound, boy, I mean, that would tell the story, at least most of it. But I'm curious to see what comes out of this. I just thought that was a very interesting defense, that he gave a deposition. And if you're doing your job and a judge would respect the fact that you're being honest in a court of law, why would that be a perceived threat? So there's
Yeah.
something there we don't know.
Yeah. There was one thing else on this. I'm sorry if you already mentioned this, and I don't know if this reporting is true, so help me out, but there's something that he said when he was being arrested. They're trying to kidnap my wife and kid. Do you remember this? Do we know if that's been confirmed, that that's what he said? And if it is, I mean, it does seem as though he somehow felt that there was a threat coming from maybe even the judge towards his wife and kid, right? I mean, it's so insane. I just can't wrap my head around it.
Yeah, and there was something in that article. I don't think he was in fear for his wife and his daughter. And I think what you see there is the result of that. And then you also have that, what's been going around, that he said they were going to kidnap my wife and kid and just treat me fairly after he shot him. There's got to be something there. We've heard consistently something about the daughter's number on the phone, whether or not that ends up being true. Lord have mercy. If we, you know what I'm saying? There is a lot
Yeah.
of things that are possible here. For me, there's so much more, because if you give a deposition and you're the sheriff and that is your deputy that has done these things, I mean, why would you feel like the judge is going to kidnap your wife and kid? So,
Yeah.
curious to see the electronics in this case. Were there text messages between these two talking about this? A lot to come out, but yeah, I'm hoping to make it up there for that one when it goes. It's going to be quite a while.
We're gonna
He's going
have
to
to
have to
get
have a
you.
mental health evaluation and all that.
We're gonna have to get you a very good frequent flyer plan for all the traveling you're gonna do for these trials.
Yeah.
Gigi, this has been. We don't have a trial date, I think, set on that case, but we'll continue to follow up. But Gigi, this has been fabulous. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you sharing all of your research and insights with all of us. If you guys are not already, please go follow Pretty Lies and Alibis. I have a suspicion that you all are already anyways, but if you're not and you're new to me and you're now new to Gigi, please go check out Pretty Lies and Alibis. Anything coming up for us on your channel that you want to share with everybody before I let you go?
Well, tomorrow I'm going to be diving into some new rulings in the Corey Richins trial. I just got documents for that. And then next week, we're just going to be doing a crash course, catching back up on the facts in the Charles Vallow case that we know, adding in some new things that we found out just to get ready for that trial. So everybody kind of knows the story going in. And so that's kind of it for me. I'm going to be busy between Phoenix, and then at the end of April, I'll start making some hops up to Salt Lake City for Corey Richins' trial. So, and then in June, I'm going to be in Tallahassee for Donna Adelson. So a lot of big cases coming up. The good thing is my daughter just went back to New Orleans today. That's where she lives. So I've been very sad, but I was like, hey, next weekend, why don't I fly you out to Phoenix? Because I have all these points from flying to Idaho for Lori. And we're going to do Tombstone, Arizona, Winslow, mainly for the Eagle song. I just want my picture at the corner. And then we're going to go to the Grand Canyon. And then in June, I'm taking all my kids to Tallahassee and I'm going to just make a vacay out of it. We're going to do the beach or something. So I just don't like being away from my family, and my 90-year-old grandma lives with me most of the time now. So I hate being out of town, but I won't do any more 6 weeks, but your girl's going to be hopping back and forth.
I love it. I love it. I love it. All right, everybody sit tight. I've got announcements for you all and everything, but Gigi, thank you again.
Thanks, everybody.
Always a pleasure. Take care.
All right, you too.
She does so much work for her channel, and the amount of research she does. Like I said, if you guys are not following, please go follow her channel right now. But let's get to some announcements and talk about a giveaway, and then I will let you guys go. Thank you so much, Jenna, for becoming a brand new YouTube member. First of all, what did you miss? If you missed it on Monday, we had the latest episode in our Courtroom Confidential conversation series with Derek Levasseur from Crime Weekly and Detective Perspective and of Big Brother fame. And it was a great conversation. And I know that I say this about all of our conversations, but it was a really great conversation. He's a remarkable dude who's got a remarkable history. You know, he started out as a police officer, then he found his way to Big Brother, then he went back to being a police officer, then he started getting into media, and now he's just kind of this true crime mogul with all of the channels that he's got. Two of the bigger ones being Crime Weekly and Detective Perspective. So if you haven't checked out that interview, please go check it out now. And we have a giveaway, and I see a panicked expression on Kaylin's face because I know we're having trouble with the media stuff on that, but he wanted to thank you all, our Courtroom Confidential community, for the support, for following him, for watching his interview. And so he thought, there he is, handsome gentleman. He thought, let's give away, if you don't know, on top of all of the other stuff that he does, he also has a coffee company called Crime Company Coffee. What is it called? Yeah. Criminal Coffee Company. Oh, I messed it up. Don't tell Derek I messed it up. Criminal Coffee Company. Alicia K. Mayo says that it was a fire conversation. It absolutely was. And so he said, hey, let's give away a $50 gift certificate to thank everybody. So we said that sounds like a fabulous idea. What do people have to do to enter to win this? There's three quick things, not big at all. Just requires your little clicking fingers. First of all, go subscribe to his channel, which is at Derek Levasseur on YouTube. Then comment on the latest YouTube video that he has saying Courtroom Confidential sent me. I would love to flood that comment section of his latest video so that he can know that the Courtroom Confidential crew also runs deep. And then leave us a message for our Ask Us a True Crime question coming up for the latest Courtroom Confidential Sunday Fun Day. And how do you go ahead and leave a message? And every single time I'm about to do this, I forget to bring it up, but you just easily go to our website, which is thecourtroomconfidential.com. And I'm going to share it with you guys right here. I hope I don't mess this up for you, Kaylin. If you go on our website, thecourtroomconfidential.com, and you click on this button, send a voice message, it will give you a box. You just click on that, start record, you pour yourself a cocktail, you clear your voice, and you leave us a question. And the questions have been amazing. And what I love most about them is it's stuff I never would have thought of. You guys are so insightful and so curious, and you have questions on cases that I never even thought of. We go from, on one Sunday, I think we were talking about the Menendez brothers, and then the next breath we're talking about Charlie Manson, and then in the next breath we're talking about Bryan Kohberger. So it's great stuff. So that's the way to enter. Follow his YouTube channel, leave them a comment, and then leave us a message, and we will send you a gift card for $50 worth of Criminal Coffee Company coffee, which I have an order in the mail right now, and I'm looking forward to drinking it because I'm a big fan of coffee. What else is going on? Stay tuned. Obviously, Sunday Fun Day is coming up. That's going to be March 30th, 9 a.m. Pacific. I've removed myself from the stage. Hold on. 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern on the East Coast this Sunday, March 30th. Please join us. It's becoming one of the funnest things we do on this channel, and I'm really looking forward to this Sunday. And then our next guest on Monday for our Courtroom Confidential conversation series will be Greg Hartley from the Behavior Panel. And Greg, hold on, I think I'm messing you up there, Kaylin. Try it again. There he is. Greg, part of what's amazing about doing these conversations is I get to meet amazing people. And the other part of it is I get to be completely humbled by how accomplished these people are. And this guy is one of the most accomplished people I've ever spoken to. He's got a long career in the military, and then he went into interrogation methods and counter interrogation methods. And he walks us through his entire history and all of that. And then he said, on top of all of that, I'm going to start this YouTube channel called The Behavior Panel. And it's one of the more successful channels on YouTube. And if you guys are not a fan, you should be. That will be premiering this coming Monday, March 31st, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. Let me give a shout out to our brand new Courtroom Confidential members, some of which joined just earlier this evening. That is Annie P., Colorado, Wendy Williams, Simone B., Misty Harris, the librarian is in, LS, aka Chester's mom, Etching Queen, Jen M., JDT Character Girl, Esme Grief, Sir Bald and Snarky, which sounds like they're opening up at Coachella this year. Check out Sir Bald and Snarky. And Grizzly True Crime, which is Gizla, which is why the vast majority of you are even here this evening, which I thank you all for so much. You guys are all fabulous. Thank you for your support. Thank you for getting us past 25,000. Again, that was super, super cool. That happened while we were live with all of you. We are continue to be humbled and impressed and touched by the support from all of you. So thank you again. Have a great evening, everybody. Take care, and we'll be talking to you soon.